Story 1. Peace in our home. The tension is something we could feel as children, and it was truly awful. Anyone who has kids and doesn't know that your kid is fully aware of what's going on, you're mistaken. Make a peaceful home if you can. Edit. I'm so sorry I can't respond to you all. I may or may not be crying when I type this out, but if you give it a chance and you try, things get better. Trust me, I know.
I'm 41.
I've lived 100 lifetimes of pain and 1,000 of love, and I choose love every time. To those that are in those homes, who have that anger, hate, and fury, don't carry that with you. It's a cancer that will rot out your heart for years. Trust me, I know. Just know this. I don't know you all, but I love you all. Seriously. Message me anytime if you're having a hard time, a bad day, a moment, if you're at the end of the rope, whenever. I'm quick to respond and I'll always take the time to talk. It's just who I am and what I do. Thank you for the upvotes and the kind words. Reading the responses hurts my heart, and you should know that a friendly voice and a kind word is just a message away. Don't forget to reach out when you need to. Story 2. When I grew up, my mom could only sometimes afford to make cookies, but to save money, she only put half a bag of chocolate chips in. When I left home and got a job, I thought it was amazing to use an entire bag and to buy expensive fruit like raspberries. Story 3. I'm just generally grateful for everything in my life. As I get ready in the morning to take my kid to the bus stop, seeing a fridge full of food, having proper beds, and an abundance of clothing choices that are appropriate for the weather and season. Being in a nice neighborhood and feeling safe, surrounded by a community with many friends that look out for each other. I feel very fortunate every day, and I like to remind my son with a smile on my face. Story 4. Cheese. When my first child was born, I remember seeing a recipe on television and thinking, who can afford that much cheese in one meal? Now, I have 4 different types of cheese in the refrigerator and feel like a king. Story 5. A washer and dryer inside of my house. Edit. We were definitely low class, but still owned an old washer and dryer. It just wasn't in our house. It was kept outside in a separate building. We called it the wash house, and it was basically just a small, uninsulated shed. I was always told that it wasn't safe to have the washer or dryer inside because we couldn't afford to pay for any water or fire damage. There were still times we survived on the local laundromat because if something broke down, buying a replacement just wasn't an option. Anytime I went to a friend's house and saw they had a laundry room or laundry closet, I was always jealous because I grew up having to walk outside and across the yard to do laundry no matter the weather. Story 6. Having milk and eggs in the house. When I first started dating my boyfriend, I wanted to bake something and was amazed that we just had everything we needed at the house. Milk, eggs, butter, etc. I kept going on about it and didn't realize it was unusual until he said that it was making him really sad. Story 7. Asking for anything that was not on the grocery list was off limits. My family used to go grocery shopping every 2 weeks with a strict list. No extras were allowed. My sister and I knew we couldn't ask for anything. Not candy, not cereal, absolutely nothing. Story 8. From birth until 5th grade, I had no running water. So, from 1981 to 1991, I did not have running water. We would use a wash pan to get cleaned up from water jugs. We would go to my grandma's and get a bath sometimes, but it was a 2-hour drive round trip. When my mom left my dad, we got running water and lived in town. I loved being able to shower and have friends over for the first time. Story 9. Our well went dry for 10 months. We had to go to a mountain spring and collect water in milk jugs. We would then heat a few big pots in order to take a bath. I was a pretty smelly 9-year-old for that period. Story 10. A car in which everything actually works. Clothes other than underwear in which I am the first person to wear them. Clothes that actually fit. Not eating the same things for every meal. Also, meals that aren't 75% or more carbs. Also, seeing my mom eat instead of skipping meals so I could eat. Eating out, but also getting to order what I actually wanted when eating out. I will always love you for letting me eat steak and ribs. Grandpa. Using soap that smelled nice when bathing. Consistent hot water. Clothes that smelled clean. Actual toilet paper. Gifts or toys that were actually new, not just new to me. Books I could keep. I could go on. But yeah, the mid-1980s to early 1990s were definitely tough. Story 11. Being homeless as a child, I remember walking down the street with my dad at dusk and seeing the lights of lamps and televisions through the windows. The desire to have that comfort was so strong. I'm not rich, but my children will never know that feeling. I will always have a home. I've lived in the same house for 15 years now. Bought it 5 years ago after renting for 10. Working hard, keeping my head down so my kids can be better than I was. My oldest is 21 now, and he tells me all the time that he has the best childhood. He lives on his own in another state. I know that's why I was put on this earth. It's for them. They'll be great and I'll be home. Story 12. I grew up in a low-income family with a single-bedroom apartment in a bad area. I didn't see a movie in a movie theater until I was 14. I didn't order takeout until I was 15. McDonald's was reserved for special occasions such as celebrating birthdays or school events. I can't remember ever going to a restaurant of a higher tier than the local Chinese shop with $8 dishes at all. I made it out and actually am likely considered upper class now, though not sure what income level cutoff is nowadays. Despite that, I think buying any article of clothing over $20 seems luxurious. Mentally, deep down I know I can afford it, but I can't pull the trigger most times. Also, buying bottled water seems insane. Even when it's $1, it just seems like you're being bougie. Story 13. First, this has to be one of the most asked questions, but I'll share my realization. I didn't grow up very poor. I just grew up in a poor area of Pennsylvania. My dad almost always had a job at a factory, and my mom picked up some hours here and there. I just didn't know any wealthier people. Then I went to college in Michigan, and did you know people here have second houses and they don't think they are rich? Like, they have a house in the city and then a cottage on a lake somewhere, and they still say, well, we are just middle class. And this cottage is pretty much another house altogether. You have 2 houses. That was unheard of where I grew up unless you were a wealthy person from Pittsburgh. Story 14. For me, it's salad. Growing up, we would have hot dogs and fries or spaghetti or mashed potatoes and chicken fingers. Whatever it was basically a whole lot of starchy filler. It wasn't until I started dating and expanding my friend circle that I realized people regularly eat fresh tomatoes, salad greens, red onions, cucumbers, and so on. Story 15. For context, I grew up in Eastern Europe in the 90s when poverty was a sign of the times, but I digress. I had one colleague in school. She never invited me over. I wasn't in her circle of friends. But I heard rumors. Her parents had bananas in a bowl. They just had bananas lying around in a bowl on the kitchen counter. Like it was nothing. Like it was an everyday occurrence. For the rest of us, bananas were a special event, a feast, and would have been a Kodak moment if any of us had owned cameras. Oh, the times, oh, the customs. Story 16. Feeling like you should not have luxury items because that is frivolous. Like when I bought my first car with leather seats and such, I had tremendous buyer's remorse. Still, get that way when I treat myself to anything nice. Story 17, weirdly, goggles. Our apartment complex had a pool, and being broke, that was our summers. It was fun, but we were there basically all day long, many times a week, and by the end of each day, my eyes were burning. Rainbows around all the lights. Really just destroyed. My cousins had goggles, and this wasn't an issue for them. I thought it was so fancy, plus you can see underwater, but we never got any. My parents always said they were pointless and didn't want to pay for them. So then I just resented my cousins and thought they were spoiled and too good to let the chlorine rot their retinas. Story 18. I wasn't poor, but we were raised by a single mom, so I guess broke. If you had a car that wasn't 10 to 15 years old, you had money. Your own bedroom? Yeah, you were loaded. A garage that wasn't used for storing old stuff? Money. You had actual meats in the fridge, like steaks, and not just bologna, tuna, and ground beef. The first time I went to someone's house and they asked if I wanted steak, I was confused. Like I knew what carne asada was, but an actual ribeye steak with potatoes? Adopt me now. Story 19, buying things because of their quality, not because they are the cheapest ones available. Clothing and underwear made of better quality cloth are easier to wash, feel more comfortable, are more durable, and look better. Story 20. One for us was a Christmas tree. For years, we couldn't afford a tree, real or fake. But we had Christmas lights, so we would make an outline of a Christmas tree on the wall and put the hand-me-down presents underneath that. I remember specifically one year all the presents were toys the neighbor kid didn't want anymore. And I recognized them because I had played with them with him. His mom saw which toys we liked playing with and gave them to my mom to regift to us. I was like 7, and that's when I realized things weren't great for us. Story 21. Being able to get things fixed immediately instead of waiting for payday or income tax refund, or getting car maintenance and tires replaced at the right time, is significant. When I was poor, I would always get the cheapest tires and drive them until they were bald. I put way too many miles on my car between oil changes. Story 22. Indoor plumbing. I grew up in a cabin in Southeast Alaska. The lack of electricity wasn't such a big deal. No TV, so I read a lot. But, man, not having to hike out with a roll of toilet paper was top-notch. Story 23. School field trips. I grew up in the 90s, and at the time, school field trips had additional fees associated, usually $5 to $10 or so. If you couldn't pay, you didn't go. Often I wouldn't even bring the permission form home to my mom, who was a single mom of 4 kids, because I knew that she couldn't afford it. Even asking to go or making her aware of the field trip at all felt like I was burdening her. I spent many field trip days sitting in the school library with a stack of activity sheets to work through on my own. Story 24. Went out with a girl who said, "Come over, we're having meat for dinner." I felt bad imposing because of how excited she was to have meat, but the family was super humble and inviting. I ate sparingly. It was grilled turkey legs. I had a lot of rice. Story 25. Getting sports shoes. I wore dress shoes that were too big to play physical education, and even those are Converse for National Junior Basketball until one year my coach, who owned a shoe store, told my parents he'd give them a discount. That year, I got basketball shoes, and it was so much easier to play in them. Story 26. Color TV or any TV. Eating out, even McDonald's. Soda, ice maker, not sharing a room, not being on the school lunch program, hotels, sporting events, concerts, movies. I hated being poor and made sure I wasn't. Earned a good living and enjoyed it. But I had a good family and parents who started young. Mom had 3 kids in diapers by 19 years old. Always felt her love and support. Story 27. A hot shower. Cold showers were always available, but when you scraped enough cash to get some diesel fuel and get the burner to kick on long enough to have a hot shower, man, there was absolutely nothing better. Story 28. Cheese and salami. As a kid, I would always go into the city and up to my grandmother's and such for dinner. We were broke because my dad was the black sheep that didn't go to college, but now he's more successful than the rest. They always have cheese and salami with a boatload of things like cannolis and other items like that. I loved it, but we couldn't afford it until recently. Story 29. Getting to buy 2 candy bars without breaking a sweat or asking for permission instead of none or one. Living in a house instead of an apartment. Getting the newest technology right when it comes out, not years later. Story 30. Honestly, hot water and having electricity were all we ever had. We had running water, but no electricity in the house. So, I took cold showers only, and homework was the first thing I started on while the sun was still out. I played with friends, came home, showered in cold water, slept, and then repeated the process. We were in poverty, but I had friends with parents who were addicts, so it could have been worse. Story 31. I was allowed to pick one snack item from the grocery store when we were doing the weekend shopping. I would sometimes anticipate weekends just for this. Sometimes I would take a chocolate bar and other times a bag of chips. And they tasted incredible compared to now. I am not poor and have kids myself. We order food every other week, and the pantry is full of snacks and sweets for my kids, as well as other trivial things which were unfathomable for me as a child. But it just doesn't taste as good as back then. Once you have an abundance, it just isn't the same anymore. Story 32. My family vacation to Branson, Missouri. For context, I live in the St. Louis area and have been pretty much my entire life. At the time, my mom was still legally a single mom at only 26 with a 5-year-old and 1-year-old. Very proud of my mama and all the hard work she has done to provide for us. We were poor when we were kids, but damn, we were happy. Story 33, having living space. Most of my life, I have existed in apartments that were smaller than 800 square feet. On rare occasions, I had the opportunity to visit or stay in someone else's home. And it was refreshing. It felt like you could breathe. Story 34, a roast. We usually had hot dogs and beans, ground beef and noodles, over-roasted, not oven-roasted but over-roasted, chicken, and that awful gelatinous glop of minute rice rehydrated in Campbell's soup. When I went to a friend's house, they had roasted meat and it wasn't Christmas, Easter, or Thanksgiving. It was just dinner. Story 35. I didn't grow up poor exactly, but as a family, we used to eat out maybe once or twice a year. And when we did, money was spent very frugally. No trying new dishes, only getting well-known items off the menu, no extras like appetizers, and shared whenever possible. So now that I go out on my own, ordering from the full menu feels very luxurious, especially getting an appetizer. I can eat something before the main entree? Amazing! And one thing I will never do is declare that I could have made it better at home. Eating out isn't just about eating a meal outside. It's about spending time together, not having to clean up, and just a whole lot less hassle.